Hello, hello. This is the request video from Andy Sullivan. He wanted to know, hello there, Mr. Pounds. How are you? I'm good. Next video request. Can you please talk about the differences between first world, second world, and third world countries? Also, which ones do you prefer the most? Why? Thanks and have a nice day. Okay. I think I've done this video already, but it wasn't a request video, and it was like 4 years ago. Difference between first, second, and third world countries. I think the main difference is economy. First world countries have the most, people make the most amount of money, and they have better infrastructure. Their roads are nicer, and they have the money to mow their lawns and all that kind of stuff. And people are busy working, and it's an economy that's going. Less unemployment. And then third world countries are kind of countries that are more closer to indigenous societies, closer to primitive, tribal type of societies like Africa. So I think there's around like 200. There's like 211 countries in the world, and rounding out like the bottom 50 are all African countries, and then so those would be the third world countries, and then South Asian and Southeast Asian would be some of the other third world countries like India and Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Indonesia. Second world would be, and third world also would be some of the Central America, like Haiti, and then some of the maybe South America like Bolivia, Honduras. And then second world would be like Australia, Chile, the Balkans, Southeast Asia, Korea. Although Korea's been doing a lot better. They may be up near like first world now. And then first world would be America, Australia, New Zealand, Western Europe, and then Eastern Europe would be kind of like second world. So I've been around all those and seen all of them. Now the economy, the reasons why some countries have better economy than others is can be complicated. I don't have it all figured out, but I don't think anybody does. But I think the main reason why first world countries, and people are welcome to correct me if they want, but first world countries have better economies because they follow the rule of law more. They have a long and look, history comes in to play a lot. Precedents, legacy. It takes a long time for countries to develop the rule of law, where people have like a constitution and laws that have been around, and people are used to following them, and all of the different social structures and the way people do business and the laws and everything are set in place, and people follow them, which allows people to not have to spin their wheels or waste their time spending too many of their resources with security and just not having it organized. The better a society is organized, the better it's going to do. The more they have, the more educated the people are with technology. There are a lot of countries in the world, like Nepal, third world countries, where their technology is just not, and their understanding of the people just is not there. I was in Nepal like in '97 or something, and I was standing in line in the immigration. There was this American woman there, and I was chatting with her, and she said that she was there up in the mountains teaching the Nepalese how to use birth control, and she said she was there a year beforehand, and she showed them how to use condoms, and in order to show them how to use condoms, she put the condoms on the branches, unraveling them on the thick branches, and she thought they understood what she was talking about. And she came back a year later, and she's like, "So have you guys been using the condoms?" And they're like, "Yeah, look at the tree." And all the trees had condoms like rolled on the branches. They thought it was some kind of like sacred witch ceremony or something, so they don't know shit. And like us, like Iraq, after we killed Saddam Hussein and put our military in there, there was I think a British businessman somehow sold $80 million worth of, I saw this on Vice, of like bomb detectors, and all it was this piece of plastic with this antenna screwed on it, and the antenna was supposed to point to the bomb, and you put different cards in it to detect different bombs, and they were just different plastic things that had different things written on it. It was totally false, but he somehow went in there. Maybe he's a good salesperson, and he sold them on it because they didn't have any understanding, So now some people might say, "Oh, there must be genetically retarded," but I don't think it's that. When you're living in a world where there's not enough educated people around, you don't really have a chance of becoming educated. And then, there's countries where most of the people in the country are like that, and so the people in power are just another stupid person. They don't know anything, And that's why we have so many terrorists, like the Taliban in Afghanistan. These people are just incredibly ignorant, and they probably sit around. I read a book about third world people, I think in Saudi Arabia, sitting around the campfire. This is like in the 70s, debating whether or not the world was flat or round, because they had heard that the Americans thought that the world was round, but they didn't know, and they were trying. They probably had their token scientist guy who believed, and then the other people were like, no, in Quran it says not, or something like that. So, they think if they kill Americans, they'll get their 70 virgins and stuff. So that's one thing that I noticed from going to third world countries is how uneducated people are. I had a friend, and he was really smart. He was a good carpenter. He could do stuff that I couldn't, and he hung out a lot. And he was illiterate, and he thought that the Vatican was in America. And I asked my wife's brother's girlfriend to draw a picture of South America. And she drew like this round thing, and she put Santiago on the eastern side, like where Rio is. So, people in those countries are very, very, very uneducated. And so, if you want to educate them, it'll take a couple of generations. You can't get people educated just in one generation, because people are formed in what they think by their parents. And if their parents aren't educated, then their kids aren't going to be educated, and then their kids aren't going to be educated. So it takes, like 5 generations or something. Just look at black people and their accents. I'm not even going to talk about their level of education. I don't really know that much because I haven't met that many. But you can tell if somebody's black in America just from their accent, So and it doesn't even matter what part of America. So, and you can tell even what somebody believes, that whether or not, even in America, whether like just from their accent or like simple stuff that they say or what religion they are. So there's still like all these different kinds of people in the world, and that are the way they are because of their environment, and it takes a long time for people to change. Now we live in a world where everybody's got the internet and TV, and you'd think that we're in this modern world, but a lot of the, before we invented planes and everybody lived around all over the world, and most people didn't travel at all, and it'd take you forever just to get to Europe. A lot of those, most of those, qualities of people and differences between people still exist to this day, in a large part. So the main difference between first world and second world, third world countries is that the first world countries, our legacy is England, and the Magna Carta, and presidential republics, and even though England is a kingdom, we've had the prime minister's been more powerful than the king, since Robert Walpole in like the early 1700s. So there's just the wealth, the decision-making process is more spread out in in England, and then America, we're even more democratic, and so we have that legacy to fall back on. Other countries don't. Like South America, they have the encomienda system as their legacy, and They're incredibly racially divided and economically divided. And because of that, the poor people are going to be extremely ignorant, and the rich people are going to be extremely ignorant in the way that they're stuck in the old world, and even their knowledge, their scientific knowledge and stuff is backwards. Like they don't think the aliens are here, and so because of people not following the rule of law in these second and third world countries, that causes them to not have a lot of money, and it causes them to not follow laws. I mean, like when we live in America, we see, I mean, more or less, we see, if you do a job, you get paid. If you charge somebody, they'll pay you. If somebody says something to you, it's true. And, if you elect somebody in office, they're going to stay in office. We don't have coups. But if you look around the world, all these other countries have coups, like violent. I mean, imagine if Fox News guys decided that they didn't like, I mean, they're talking about impeach Obama, but they can't do anything. Imagine if they said impeach Obama and then tomorrow they actually showed up with their guns and they actually kicked him out. I mean, that would be like terrifying to America, and that would never happen. But that happens in other countries all the time. It happened in Chile in like '73 with when Pinochet kicked out Allende. I think that, and there were civil war in Argentina in the '80s between the politicians and then so I mean, and we have crime in America, but not on the level of these other countries. Like in Argentina and Chile, they murdered 30,000 people just because they were on the opposing party. And other countries don't have freedoms like America either. People weren't allowed to go outside after 8 o'clock at night in Chile during the 70s and this kind of thing. So yeah, but I've got my little stories too. It's like I was in Nepal. And we were at this restaurant, and I ordered a burrito, right? Burrito, ooh, cool, burrito. And then my friend ordered something, and somebody else ordered something else. And we were the only customers there. And it was like 3 of these like young, early 20s people who didn't really seem to speak English. And they took our order, and we were sitting there, we were hanging out, a bunch of different tourists, so we weren't really in a rush, but we were there for like 3 hours, and they never brought the food out. We started to wait, and we went back and asked them what was going on, because we were the only people there. We're like, what's going on? And finally, I think we asked them, and they finally brought the food out, and my burrito was white Wonder Bread with really thin, like barely any refried beans smeared on it. But it looked like it had been put there like 2 or 3 hours beforehand, because it was totally soggy and it was cold. And that was it. And and my friend got something else. It was just as ridiculous. I can't remember what it was. And like my friends, they freaked out. This English guy was like, "I'm not paying for this." And somebody else said, "I'm not even eating this." And some girl was like, "I'm eating it. I'm dying of hunger. I'm going to eat what I have, even though I can barely eat it." It was some kind of like soup where it was just like cold water with like just pieces of like vegetable thrown in or something. And I ate mine, and it was hard to eat, but I ate it. And they didn't say anything, the people who worked there, and that kind of thing. I got a salad in Bolivia at a restaurant, and like half of it was lettuce and the other half was onion, and I could barely eat it. I mean, if you ever eat a salad where half of what you're eating is onion, it'll burn your mouth up. I could barely eat it. I was in excruciating pain. But that's what they called a salad. So, yeah, that kind of stuff. And then, of course, the professionalism. They don't, like in Argentina, I was there in 2001 when they defaulted on their loan. And I got a job teaching English, and I taught English for 2 months. And they never paid me, and I thought that they would. So I told them that I would go and travel around Brazil, other countries, and come back in like a month and a half. So I did that. And I came back, and they still hadn't paid me. So I was like, all right, well, so I just stayed there 3 weeks calling them every like couple of days until they finally gave me a check. But I didn't look at the date. And when I finally looked at the date, it was post-dated for 2 months after that. And then the check that it was for this bank that didn't even exist anymore because there were these 2 brothers who owned it. This is what the guy who I was trying to, at some other place, I guess a bank, said. He was, there's 2 brothers who owned it. One of the brothers was in prison. The other one had disappeared with $200 million, like cash. and 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 there were people protesting in the streets, banging on pots and pans because they couldn't take any money out of the bank, so they were all like, there were people standing in line all the way around the whole block, like 2 lengths of the block, down the block and then down the other side of the block, just to try to get their money out. And people would have to get like all of their family members signed up to the account, and they'd all stand in line, taking turns standing in line to try to get all their money out before the devaluation happened, because they devalued like 350%. They were pegged to the dollar, and then it was like 3.5 pesos to the dollar after it. And just this kind of stuff. And this was like when I was there, so, one big difference between second and third world countries and first world countries is people in second and third world countries, like, telling the truth doesn't really mean anything. Like, they'll say anything. I was in Indonesia, and some dude wanted to be a tour guide for me at the mosque, and he said he was Bill Clinton's tour guide, and he said there were thousands of people there praying at this church every 5 o'clock every morning, and then at the end he said, he said I had to like pay him and pay the guard and all this stuff, and they'll also try to chinch you out of money too. They'll tell you one price, and then you'll do it, and then they'll give you another price even higher. They think, and I guess it's true, but they think like tourists are like so loaded that they don't even care about money, and so they'll lie, and they'll get money out of you by lying. And like borrowing money from you and then not paying you back. And I've experienced that a bunch of times. I'm pretty gullible. But and another thing you'll notice about third world countries is they sit around a lot. Like, the unemployment is so high that people, like, time doesn't exist to them. Like, nobody's in a hurry. I'm talking about the people who are unemployed. I'm not talking about the rich people. Like, the rich people in every country in the world, every third world country in the world, they're just like the rich people in America, So if you would get Mitt Romney to go do some, or like some oil lobbyist or whatever, to go do some deal with the oil lobbyist or whatever from you name it, any third world country, they're pretty much the same people. Same, they live in the same kind of houses. Only difference is the person in the third world country has got like an army of people waiting on them at their house, kind of like it's the South of America in slavery times, and they're dressed in the maid outfits. Like here in America, you'd have people clean your house and stuff, but they're not in the outfit. Like in Chile, you would have, I was teaching this for this lady, and her husband died, but she had, I think, 3 kids, and she didn't have a job, but she had 2 people who were there all day, every day, like waiting on them, and they were both dressed like maids. And the people who wait on them aren't your friend. Like, you don't talk to them. They treat them like workers, like, go get me a water. And they, go off, and they're just standing there, working. And, so that's one difference. And, in America, you would have, like, Juanetta or whatever come over and clean your house, but then she'd go and live somewhere else, and then you would talk and chit-chat with her about her family, but I didn't, not really over there. They sit around a lot. I rode my bike through Morocco back in '97, and I was passing through one road for a bunch of miles, and there were all these guys sitting at the bottom of orange trees with their oranges in these baskets to try to sell the oranges to people driving by, and none of them, you could tell none of them were going to sell orange that day because they were like every 100 feet. But, you could feel really sad, really, for people who just sit around all day, but to them, it's not as bad as you might think, because to them, they can sit around all day and not really get bored. I was in Nepal, and there were these Nepalese who come and hang out with us, and they would just kind of like sit with us and just sit there all day with us and not even say anything, but they just hang out, And my friend, Saul, the illiterate guy in Chile, he'd come over and just hang out with us all day, every day, because he didn't have a job, and, they just, just sit there, hey, how's it going, And, in America, we have stuff to do. We have things to occupy our time. We have video games, television. You could go out to the bar. There's all kinds of stuff you can do. You can go bike ride around the bike path or something. But over there, you don't really have anything to do. So you just go to somebody's nice house. Like you would go to somebody's house just because they have a nice yard, and you just sit there, you know. And but since that's all you know, you wouldn't be bored with it. Like an American would die of boredom doing that, because we would be like, you know, what am I doing with my life? What's happening? I should do something. But yeah, if you haven't really done anything like that. So I think people who go to third world countries and give people stuff to do, that's a great service to them, especially when it has to do with education, setting up schools with the computers and you know, giving them, setting up, you know, bike race programs or whatever, and just activities to get people to do stuff and be busy all day long. I think it can cause problems in the really poor countries like Africa, where they could, you know, rebels would start armies, because a lot of people throughout history would join an army and invade a country because they have nothing else to do, because it's like third world country type of stuff. And I think a lot of people do that just because of that. They just don't want excitement, and they'll pay them to go travel around and shoot people, and cool. Yeah, but yeah, yeah, people don't really follow the rule of law as much. I mean, it's easier to get a job under the table in another country, but of course, you know, well, in Chile, for example, and I think this is pretty much true the world over in third world countries and second world countries, is if you get a job and they pay you and they agree to pay you, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get paid. And actually, as a rule of thumb, you're going to get underpaid. They'll pay you less. I did a classes, and even the professional people with the nice jobs, I did a bunch of classes with somebody and with somebody's kid. And when she paid me, and I actually undercharged her a lot. Like I didn't charge, because like the girl called me to go there twice, and I showed up and she didn't want the class, and I didn't charge her for those when I should have, but I didn't. Anyways, when the lady paid me, she didn't even pay me for one of the classes I did do. And then, you know, I did some classes for somebody else, institute person, and they underpaid me $50. And so like in America, you know, where the tradition would be to tip somebody, in a country like that, the tradition would be to just underpay them, because it's kind of like they're tipping themselves. And yeah, and there's a lot of animosity also between third world countries. I know I'm talking a lot of trash about third world countries, but I'll try to finish it up with saying friendly things, nice things about them, because there is stuff about third world countries that's better about first world countries. But in third world countries and second world countries, neighbors hate each other. Like Serbians and Croats hate each other. Chileans and Argentinians don't like each other. Chileans and Bolivians hate each other. And not just the people, but the governments. Like Bolivia has oil, and Chile needs oil, but Bolivia doesn't like Chile, so Bolivia refuses to sell oil to Chile. And Bolivia sells oil to Argentina, but only under the condition that they don't sell it to Chile. It's like little kids running the country. Because they're pissed off because like 150 years ago they had a war and Chile took Bolivia's beach away. So, so you know, when you, like, I do a lot of videos about talking about other countries. So when you hear these people like from these third world countries like, I hate America, Americans are so stupid. Well, it's not so much that they hate America, but that's just kind of the attitude that they have. If you're like, they say that stuff about their next door neighbor. You know, Iraq and Iran had a civil war for 8 years in the 80s. And there's also border disputes of all these third world countries. Like you look at the map on the like the globe, and it looks like a border, but that's just the border that's kind of like the most commonly agreed on. But you know, Colombia and I think Brazil, they have their borders are totally different depending on who you're talking to. Same thing with you know, like I think Guyana and Brazil and Peru and Ecuador and this kind of stuff. They don't really follow the rule of law, and yeah, and they'll cut corners too. They don't like they like to jimmy rig stuff all the time. In Chile, there's this weird thing that, like, when the workers come over to, like, the electrician to come over and work on your electricity, or to, even if it's just a normal worker to go and, like, do some construction on your house, instead of bringing a power tool with the prongs that come out that you plug into the wall and an extension cord, they just find the cable that feeds the house with electricity, and they'll chop a chunk of plastic off it, and then they'll wrap their power tool around that cable directly. So all their power tools don't even have prongs. They have like wires that stick out, and then they use them, and then when they leave, they don't put the sheath back on. Once I opened up my in-laws' house, it was my wife's house, and I grabbed this big metal door with one hand, and the other hand I just happened to touch the part of the wire that was running along the side of the house that was raw, feeding the house with electricity. And I was like, I electrocuted myself. Luckily, I was holding onto the door. I think that was grounding me. And I finally let go. It stuck me, and I was pissed. It filled me with energy or something. I was pissed off, and I was like, what the fuck? Who's doing that? And they're like, oh, yeah, whoops. So I went and covered it immediately with electrical tape. But, I mean, people in third and second world countries die from that stuff all the time. My wife's son's father's brother died because he got out of his hot tub or his bathtub in his house, his own house, and he stepped on a live wire that I guess he never bothered to put around the wall or cover up with electric tape, and electrocuted himself to death. I had a friend in Albania whose dad died because he was a construction guy working on some house, and his ladder touched an electric cord and electrocuted himself to death. And my wife and her brother, actually, they have these third-degree scars, my wife on her leg and her brother on her face, because they got burnt when they were kids. She walked into a heater in the house. So safety standards, in the 1500s in England, I think only half of the kids made it to adulthood because they'd all die of weird accidents. Well, that kind of stuff still happens in second and third world countries. People, well, I don't know about dying, but they have accidents, and a lot of people die from just freak accidents. So this, safety regulations and regulations against stuffing the ballot and anti-corruption legislation and all this kind of stuff. First world countries are light years ahead of third world countries. Third world countries, it's kind of like going back 200 years. And, it all boils down to education. They're just not, they haven't been all educated for long enough where they haven't caught up with it. They're still trying to learn how to work the computer, so I think I think that all causes them to have problems economically. When countries that have so much wealth discrepancy and so little people really knowing how to operate a business that can go smoothly. For example, in Chile, because I lived there 5 years, people just distrust each other and always ripping each other off. So they're really freaked out. Like if I show up and I forget to bring my book or something, they think that, oh my God, I'm a bad guy or something. I'm going to fire you. They'll fire each other, and then they'll quit. So they have to get somebody else. They have to retrain somebody else. And it seemed like people couldn't hold a job. Like anybody I knew couldn't hold a job more than a couple of months because they'd always getting fired, or they wouldn't. And then they wouldn't show up. And I worked for this lady teaching English once, and she was going to pay me, get the check. So I asked her what her address was, and she didn't want to give me her address because she thought that I couldn't find it if I gave her address. She had to feel like she had to give me the exact directions on how to get there. She hadn't heard of MapQuest yet. This was in 2005 or something like that, or 2004, 2005, and I was like, just give me the address. I have internet. And she's like, oh no, then you take a left. Oh no, and then she got confused and said, oh, never mind. Next time I see you, I'll just give it to you. So yeah, they're not that good at technology. But the younger people are. I don't think there's any genetic difference between people in the third world country and people in the first world country. It's just that people are a product of their environment, big time, and it takes a long time. You can't change people and change a whole society of people in 1 or 2 generations. And, it takes like many generations. And well, one reason I think South America is more primitive than first world, they're second world, because of the encomienda system, and people were brought there on boats. The poor people were kind of scraped up off the streets in Spain and just kind of shipped here to work as workers. And then they kept as workers here. But in America, everybody who came over was on the same level. They went over on themselves. There was no indentured servitude coming to America. People would save up and pay for it, or they'd all chip in and buy a boat and sail themselves over. And so everybody's on the same level here. And that's why in third world countries, in second world countries, there's a more similarity between second and third world countries than there are between second and first world countries. In those poor countries, kids at the public schools, they all have to wear uniforms because, some people have a little bit more money than others, and so they would dress better. And I mean, to them, dressing better and looking like you're richer and being richer, it's such a chasm that the rich kid would get picked on. The poor kid would feel would feel outcast, and so they'll have to wear the uniforms to all make them look the same. And of course, all the rich kids, the people who would live in houses that look like houses in America, the lawyers who would get like 60 times more money than the parents of the poor kids on the other side of the town. All those kids go to private school. And oh my God, and there's actually a bigger difference between the super rich people in third world countries and the super poor people than there is between like people from the rich people from that country. Well, I wouldn't say that, but people from different countries in first world countries, like Chile. I mean, the super poor people, they don't really have opinions, and so it's all kind of. They don't really know anything. And they don't even understand the concept of having an opinion about something. They think that's for somebody else. But the super rich people, they have opinions, but they're so one-track minded with their opinion, you can't veer them off their track. They're convinced about it, and they think they're the smartest person ever. And so they think that it's kind of like they think they're a whole different race, a whole different order of humanity than those poor people. And it has to stay that way, and this is the natural way that it is. And if you go to those poor people neighborhood, you will get killed. I had a student who was one of these rich kids, and I told him where I lived. He's like, "And you ride your bike there, and you survive? Oh my God!" But I ended up getting mugged in my neighborhood though. So you do have to keep moving, or they will like swarm you and grab your bike from you, which is what happened to me. So yeah. I have a lot more stories too about just weird stuff. I've told them in my what an American thinks about countries. I've told them in my traveling vlogs, but maybe told a couple in what an American thinks about countries. But you do see some weird stuff. Like in Guyana, we were crossing some weird border checkpoint between Georgetown, and the jungle. And it was within Guyana, so I don't know why you had to pass a checkpoint. Maybe it was because you had to pass through the jungle, and it was this 4-wheel drive trail with jaguars, and they just wanted to keep track of people because maybe people were disappearing or something. But there was this border guard there, or checkpoint guard there, who was drunk off his ass, holding a shotgun, and he was refusing to let us pass. So we're having to stand there for like a half hour while he's just sitting there like being belligerent, like yelling at the driver of the car, like trying to give him a reason to shoot him or something. And then he finally got bored with it. And he was blaming the car driver for something, but he was so drunk he could barely talk. And then finally he stamped him in, stuff that you would never see in a first world country. But yeah, people are really poor in those countries. I don't really know how the economy works. Why they're so poor. If you were to go to the Falkland Islands, which England owns, there's English people living there off the coast of Argentina, it'd be like being in England and everybody would look like they have money. Well, because they're aided by the first world country. You know, there are a lot of states that suck more money than they're given just because they're part of America. I mean, Hawaii's probably, I don't know if Hawaii is a big tourist place, but yeah, in third world countries, they're all on their own. Little countries, they're all on their own, and so they don't have any help, and so they kind of don't have any. And all of the industry, I mean, I know that first world countries do have a reputation of taking advantage. Like oil companies would go in there and take their oil, and then they wouldn't include, like in the census of the people who live around there, they wouldn't include the indigenous people, and they wouldn't, if they take the land from them, they wouldn't pay them back or anything like that. They don't really treat them like human beings, and then it ends up making America a lot more money than what they owe the people who they took the land from in the third world country, and which causes them to, you know, they lose their land, so then they lose their you know, traditional livelihood, so then they have to get a job, and then they get a job at a factory making like $1 a day, which when the clothes get shipped off to America at Walmart, and I think, you know, the poor people in third world countries, or third world countries being poor, they're all poor for different reasons, and a lot of those countries, I'm sure, are poor because it's not their fault, because they're getting shafted by their people, their politicians, who with the help of big companies in America and, you know, developed countries, just get themselves rich and don't pay back the poor people because they're illiterate and they don't know how to defend themselves, and I'm sure there's a lot of blame on America for that kind of stuff. But I don't really know the details so much about that. I should study it. But and you know, it kind of causes this snowball effect, sort of, when all of the industries that super rich people who rip off their own people in these third world countries, the stuff that they spend their money on isn't like tour guides in their own country or whatever. When they get filthy rich, they spend their money on, guess what? Like Ferraris and Lamborghinis and technology stuff. So the money that they spend goes back to the first world countries and makes the first world countries even richer. And it doesn't get recycled. It doesn't into their own country. So it's kind of like we're leeching all the resources out of these third world countries. When, you know, if that third world country was just, say, like the 51st state of America, then we could bring companies in there to, you know, start industry in there and get them up to speed, which we are doing with a lot of outsourcing. Only, you know, the money that's made from that goes to the bosses of the company, you know, and so and you know, shareholders who have money to invest in stuff. So it just gets rich people richer, and doesn't really do its job of getting back in the hands of the indigenous people in the poor people in these third world countries. And you know, it's up to the people in those countries to set up laws where it does, you know, where they can get a higher minimum wage at the expense of the super rich leaders of their country. And so yeah, in order to fix that, I think we should just, you know, like really scale back, like copyright type of, and you know, type of laws where they could start their own industries over there, like just give them or give them a reasonable price for the licensing of different things, like Coca-Cola. Like my wife's family down there in Chile were addicted to Coca-Cola. Well, Coca-Cola's American, so the money was going back there for a large part. So to just, you know, say, okay, here, we'll charge you less, and then you can make your own factory there, and then the money can get recycled in the third world country. Okay, so now for the positive parts of third world countries. Well, because people can sit around and like chill out and not like be busybodies all the time, they're more relaxed, and they're not like, they don't freak out and get stressed out, and they're chill. They're also less judgmental. I'm talking about the poor people. The rich people in third world countries are more judgmental than anybody in America. Like the difference is so big between the two people, the poor and the rich, in these second, third world countries, that they can't even talk to each other at all, at least in Latin America, in Chile. And it's also, you can tell how much money up somebody has by looking at them. The color of their skin, their race, but also the way they talk and the words they use. And Yeah, so, but yeah, they're not very judgmental. You know, you can act all crazy. Well, they're more tolerant of like acting crazy and drunk and stuff, but that's because they do it more. People who are really poor suffer from alcoholism more because that's more of a kind of like, that's like one of the last activities that you can do when you're that poor. You know, you can afford maybe a beer and okay, that's what we'll do then. And so then they don't know anything, so then they get drunk and crazy. And so when you act like that, they're not going to, get pissed off at you. They're more forgiving. And I think they are more forgiving in general also. I'm talking about Chile. People would, if you have a falling out with a friend or whatever, they'll call you back and they forget and forgive a lot quicker. But they also rip each other off like friends do. Yeah, there's just not as much professionalism, and people don't do what they say they're going to do in those kinds of countries. But I've toured through Scandinavia, Northern Europe, and stuff, and those countries, Scandinavia and Germany and the Netherlands, Netherlands is wild because they have bike paths everywhere. But all those kinds of countries, I was surprised with how similar, like Sweden and Norway, or how similar those countries were to America. Like I might as well be in America. So much of our culture comes from there. The houses look the same. The streets and everything look the same. The people look the same. The cars are the same. Might as well be another state in America. But people far north, they have a tendency to be really, professional and hard workers and do what they say because you have to be, since the beginning of time, they had to have their shit together if they're going to survive. They had to get up at the crack of dawn and work all day long to store away their stores of grain for the winter, and their meat and all that kind of stuff for the wintertime. And I think that's one reason that people in Northern Europe are more responsible than people in Southern Europe. And then, of course, the people in Africa, they could walk around naked all day long, and, if they get hungry, they'll just pick a banana off the tree. Or there's animals everywhere, so they'll just throw a rock at an animal. And so they just could do that all the time, and it never really gave an incentive to start up a civilization and get in the habit, which takes generations and generations and generations of getting better, of having a system where you have like just people who are used to systematized way to do business and laws to set up, and then the respect of following those laws, and then of course doing what you say you're going to do and all this kind of stuff. To just go into a country and, like, for example, Iraq, people say, go into a country and say, all right, here, you guys are going to have democracy, and then leave. It's too much to expect of them. You can't just give something to them and then expect that they're going to run with it. They're going to be able to elect anybody as the president, even if it's the different kind of Muslim that you are, and so yeah, I said they're like people in third world countries are more tolerant. I meant like just in the way you act and stuff. But in general, America, first world countries are a lot more tolerant. You can be gay in America, and in Iraq, if you're gay, you get killed, and So yeah, I think people have money because the countries have money because the people are more educated. Countries are made up by the people. If you were to the United States of America, with all the houses, even with everything, if you were to get all those the Bushmen in Africa to come to America, and then you were to transplant all of Americans into Africa, and then check up on them 50 years later, well, in 50 years, they will have rebuilt Africa in houses that look like America, and then they would have a system, and it would be America over there. And then you come to America, the Bushmen would have burnt down the houses to make their fires, and then they'd be all like running through the fields, in their underwear, throwing spears at like buffalo or something, For example, they tried to give houses to the Aborigines in Australia, and they just took the house. They literally did dismantle the houses and make fires on the inside of them. And then they took to just wandering around. So, yeah, it takes a long time. So, I mean, and I don't know. It may be a little bit harder to understand if you're a young person these days in America, because you look around and you think everybody should be the same. But if you were to tell somebody who's really old now, it would make more sense. Especially somebody who lived 100 years ago. There's primitive tribes of people in like islands of Indonesia or the jungle of Africa who just don't have that civilization. You know, like 200 years ago, it was obvious they just don't have it. But we had it 2,000 years ago with the Roman. We had coin money and you know, banks and all that kind of stuff, interest rates and you know, worker guilds and all this stuff forever, and we've been just slowly building up on it for generations, and they haven't. So yeah, just to think that you can make them a first world country, or think that the difference is just money. It's deeper than that. Yeah, second world country would be countries that have less respect for rule of law. You know, like Chile, which have a little bit more catch up to do. Third world country would be somebody like Africa in the jungle, people living in the jungle. And then first world would be people who've just had cities and towns and society for a long time, like Western Europe and America. And yeah, that's about the difference between first, second, and third world countries. Sorry if I sound like a dick, but I mean because a lot of people get pissed off when I talk about different countries and I just talk. But see, people in third world countries, they also don't understand the concept of having a concept about something, and they're also really black and white. So if you say something that identifies you as like the other guy, the other country or whatever, then you're the enemy. So I think that's kind of the problem that people have had with me when I talk about other countries, is I say something and I'm just honest. They don't understand the concept of that, of just saying something. Because in their country, if you just say something, you're like part of the secret service of the other country that's trying to take over your country, and you've got some agenda, and so I mean that's why they don't make videos themselves. If you go on YouTube, you're never going to see somebody from a third world country upload a video. I've never seen it, and if you see it, I mean, I guess there's some Russians, and one reason, see, Russia's an old country, but one reason they're not first world is because, you know, they're a big country, and they have more to do with nomadic type of primitive people from the Russian steppe, you know, and the people out there and towards Mongolia and all of that, and look at Russia now. It's all of that primitive, as they've been playing catch up with Western Europe all the way until today, and now today, yeah, sure, they may have laws and stuff, but they don't really follow them. You know, that guy, there's a billionaire who owns one of those NFL teams. He had a Super Bowl ring, and he showed Vladimir Putin to look at it, and Vladimir Putin just took it and walked away with it. You know, I mean, that's the kind of stuff they do. In Russia, everybody has dash cams on their cars because people are always crashing into each other, and they need to prove that they didn't cause a wreck. And then people are putting dash cams on their cars, and yeah, so there's just, they don't really follow the rule of law. But the reason is because they never did. You know, they've just been playing catch up. So, I mean, Russia was owned by the Golden Horde, by the hordes of Mongols, Genghis Khan's kids, all the way until Ivan the Terrible back in the 1500s. You know, I mean, so it takes a while. It takes a while. Yeah, but yeah, that's why you don't see these people. I mean, sometimes they might say, "Oh, I can't afford it. I don't have a video camera." Well, even the ones who have video cameras, you're not going to see them upload videos in those countries. It's only going to be America. Why is China second world now instead of first world? When they're an old country and they've had cities forever. Well, that's a good question. They haven't had the technology as long as we've had. We invented the technology of the industrial age and sailing around the world and trading and stuff, and they haven't. They've been kind of holed up. They were really ethnocentric for a long time, which caused them to not want to have anything to do with even Europeans, because we were white and hairy. They thought we were like lower than them, even though we had all this cool technology. So they've only been introduced to it in the last like 50 years, and so they're kind of playing catch up and stuff. But they're smart, so they'll do all right. Okay, well that's about all I can think of. Difference between first, second, and third world countries.